In this video, we'll explore analyzing qualitative data. Just like quantitative data, there are multiple semester-long courses about collecting and analyzing qualitative data. In this video, we're just going through a very cursory review of the process of analyzing qualitative data. Let's begin with a definition of qualitative data. Qualitative data are data that are not in numeric form. Examples of sources of qualitative data include interviews, focus groups, observations, writing samples, and discussion boards. In this course, you gathered your qualitative data from the open response questions on your survey. So, what is the purpose of qualitative data? If we have all of these numbers from our quantitative data, why do we need all of these words or more information? Qualitative data can help us to understand the why behind all the numerical information. Qualitative data can provide the context of a research study. They can provide more details and give you a richer and deeper understanding of your research question. One way to remember the difference between the two is to think of quantitative data as supplying us with the what and qualitative data as supplying us with the why. Let's look at an example. Let's say you have a question on your survey about do you teach character education? And you find that 70% of the respondents say yes and 30% say no. We may wonder why some teachers do teach character education and others do not. So you might go in and interview teachers. The qualitative data we get from the interviews helps to illuminate and give us more information than the quantitative data alone. So, how will you analyze your qualitative data? Again, you won't be doing a thorough and extensive analysis like you would for a full study, but there are a few qualitative analysis techniques that you can use for this course. First, you'll need to collect the qualitative data you gathered through your survey. Since you're using the free version of SurveyMonkey, you'll need to go through a few steps to access your data. Once you're in SurveyMonkey, locate the name of your survey, and then move over to the column that says Analyze and click on the icon that looks like a graph. Find one of your open response questions. Depending on the number and length of the responses, you may need to scroll down to review all of the responses. It'll be easier to analyze this data if you could copy it all into a Word document. One way to do that is to click and drag to highlight the responses. If there are multiple pages, just keep dragging your mouse down and you should be able to highlight all the text. Then select Copy. Next, go into a blank Word document. And now in Word, I'll choose Paste. It might be easier to take out some of this extraneous information before I do my analysis. And I'm going to make this a little bigger so it's easier for everybody to read. So once you have all your responses in a Word document, your first step for analyzing your qualitative data is to read through all the data so you have a general impression of the responses. Next, you can begin coding by reading carefully line by line and marking the words related to your research question that strike you as interesting, relevant, revealing, or surprising. In this example, I've used Word's underline feature to note what I think might help to answer my research questions. After you've done your coding, you'll need to identify themes or patterns. Themes are groups of similar responses. You'll have to read through your data multiple times because you won't be able to pick up all the themes on your first review of the data. Then you can assign a color to a specific theme and highlight responses that seem to fit into similar themes. I noticed one theme in the responses was prefer that schools not teach about LGBTQ students, and I'll highlight those responses with yellow. I also notice another theme that participants think that schools should teach about LGBTQ students, and I'll highlight those comments in pink. A third theme I notice is that some participants feel schools should provide a safe and accepting environment for students, so I'll highlight those responses with green. Notice that not all the responses are using the exact same words, but I have identified a broad category of safe and accepting environment, and all of these comments seem to fit into that category. To help you align your themes with your research questions, you'll use the data analysis template. In this example, the responses we just highlighted were related to the first research question about what people believe is the role of schools in educating students about LGBTQ students. I'll scroll down in the template, and here's where I can begin entering my themes. One theme that we identified is that some people believe that schools should not teach about LGBTQ students. Another theme that we found was that there were those who believed that schools should teach about LGBTQ students. And a third theme was that the schools should provide a safe and accepting environment. Then you go back and look at those themes, and you might pull out some quotes that are examples of those themes. When you're writing the responses to your research questions in your final paper, these types of quotes help support why you selected that as a theme. Your quotes are taken directly from your survey response and should appear in your paper with quotation marks. Since your survey is anonymous, there's no way or need for you to identify exactly who provided that quote. One other method to analyze your data is to print out all the pages of your Word document and code with pencil or pen, and then use a good old highlighter. Sometimes it's easier to do this type of coding manually, just putting all the papers out in a table in front of you and using a highlighter. It's personal preference whichever way you choose. Either way, the data analysis template should help you organize your data so that when you write your final paper, you have your data aligned with each of your research questions. You can then synthesize all of this information to provide a thorough response to each research question.